The Philadelphia Eagles just made Saquon Barkley the highest paid running back in NFL history, and I still think he's underpaid. I'll tell you why next on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome into this Tuesday edition of the show. Whether you're listening in Philadelphia, New York, California, Australia, doesn't matter. We thank you so much for being a part of your every single day. Saquon Barkley is now the highest paid running back in NFL history. The Philadelphia Eagles agreeing to a 2-year extension with their top running back. $41.2 million in total potential earnings, $36 million guaranteed, $20+ million a year for number 26. What an incredible story. It's why I love the NFL. If you would have told me a year ago that Howie Roseman, not that he would pay a running back historic money like this, more money than a running back has ever gotten, but if you would have just said Howie Roseman was going to pay a running back any contract that wasn't a 1-year league minimum type of deal, I would have said you're crazy. 365 days later, he has made a running back the highest paid player at his position ever. But that's what makes Howie Roseman so great, is that he is constantly changing his philosophies as he has presented new evidence that says this is now the way to go in the NFL. The league is zigging this way, you should zag that way. And it helped him win a championship. It was the main reason the Eagles won a Super Bowl in 2024, bringing in Saquon Barkley. And I think this is maybe the best move that Howie Roseman has ever made in his career, signing Saquon Barkley. What an amazing story for a player that was lost with a bad team, for a position at running back that has been chewed up and spit out by this league for over a decade, used after rookie contracts. Nobody, even the best of the best, can't get paid. You look at even back in the day, Le'Veon Bell holding out for an entire year because he want to get paid what he's worth, and he can't get the contract no matter what. For a team in the Eagles that never, like I said, that never liked to invest in this position, for it to result in a Super Bowl in 2024 that a running back carried you to, you beat, by the way, a dynasty looking for a three-peat that was led by a quarterback. And yes, Jalen Hurts is the reason you won the game, Super Bowl 59. But who was the main reason you won the Super Bowl from an entirety perspective? The entire season, the playoffs, the Super Bowl as a whole. It was Saquon Barkley. For somebody to do that at this position in 2024, it's amazing. But Saquon Barkley, I still don't believe if you're building a contender that you should consistently invest first, second-round picks, top contracts in the running back position. I don't think after Saquon Barkley, the Eagles should stick with this strategy either. But this is a unique story. It was unique circumstances where it was the perfect player at the perfect time. This isn't, I don't like calling Saquon Barkley a running back. This isn't just any running back. This is a generational, historic offensive weapon that is already one of the best team leaders as well in Eagles history. This is a player that had the single greatest season a running back has ever had in 2024, breaking Terrell Davis's record for the most yards when you combine the regular season and the playoffs. This isn't just any running back. This is one of the greatest running backs of all time. This is a running back that you could consistently rely on to rip off 20-plus yard plays, 30, 40, heck, even 60, 70-plus yard touchdowns like he was Deshaun Jackson, but he's in the backfield. That is who Saquon Barkley was in 2024. This was a guy that in the fourth quarter of one-score games, you could always rely on to be the guy that makes the play to win the game. He was, if you even combine quarterbacks into this equation, into this conversation, Saquon Barkley was the best fourth-quarter player in all of football this year. So yes, this was the perfect time and the perfect player to finally invest in this position. It was just the perfect player, and like I said, it was the perfect time. You needed this piece to get over the hump. Right? When you look at what happened in 2023, the collapse, when you look at the 2-2 start this year, all the chaos and drama surrounding that heading into the bye week, Do you think that you recover from that collapse in this year's drama without Saquon Barkley carrying you after the bye week? Do you think that his new, fresh leadership, do you think without that, the Eagles win a championship? Do you think they even make it to the playoffs or win playoff games, let alone win a championship without Saquon Barkley? I'm not so sure. It was the perfect time for where this team was from a roster perspective, but it was also the right time because when you look at the NFL, like I said, this position has been chewed up and swallowed, spit out, I should say, for a decade plus, where there was just a massive overcorrection of this position. Nobody was paying running backs. Almost nobody was even drafting them high. Like, there's only been a couple players that have been taken in the first round at running back in the last decade. You got Saquon Barkley. Like, this was such an overcorrection, such a market inefficiency that you got Saquon Barkley, one of the greatest players in NFL history, for the price of Darnell Mooney and Gabriel Davis. Like, that is unbelievable. And I think contenders are going to see not just what the Eagles did, but what the Ravens did with Derrick Henry, what the Packers did with Josh Jacobs, what the Texans did with Joe Mixon. Contenders are going to see, like, not everyone should do this, but contenders are going to see what these teams did, taking advantage of a market inefficiency, getting a star player for a bargain rate because of their position, and I think they're going to try to replicate it as their final piece to win a Super Bowl. But the problem is, like Howie Roseman has said before, if you're copying a team, odds are you're too late, and there's another way to do things. And the Eagles with Saquon Barkley, again, they struck at the right time. This was a good time to make this your first time going all in at the running back position. I, again, think this is the greatest move that Howie Roseman has ever made in his entire career. And that involves trading up for Carson Wentz, signing Nick Foles in free agency. Howie has made some incredible moves, drafting Jalen Hurts in the second round. Yeah, again, without Jalen Hurts, like, that's your quarterback. He's the main reason for this golden era of Eagles football. But Saquon Barkley was the missing piece. He was the difference between losing a Super Bowl, making the playoffs, but winning a championship. That's the difference. Saquon Barkley was the guy to put you over the top. And how awesome of a story is it to see a running back have that kind of impact on a championship team in 2024. And like I said, beat a dynasty that was led by one of the top two greatest quarterbacks of all time. I mean, that is a big win for running backs out there. It's one of the coolest stories that you'll see in sports. And now, to make this contract worth it, though, you're going to have to make sure Saquon Barkley stays healthy. Again, $41.2 million in total earnings, $36 million in guarantees, $20+ million a year for his annual salary. If you want to make this contract not be about what he's done for you, but what he's going to do, the Eagles need to make sure that Saquon stays healthy for the stretch run of 2025, for the stretch run of 2026. They need to add more balance, I think, in this offense. Even though the offense should still run through Saquon Barkley in 2025. Like, play him until the wheels come off. Now, he is not on I think he's still underpaid for the impact he has on this team, but he is not on a Gabriel Davis, Darnell Mooney-like contract anymore where he's getting paid like a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. No, now he got the bag. Like, we knew after that Super Bowl season, he was going to want a new extension. Like, this was a matter of time. This was going to happen at some point this offseason. Now that he is paid like a star, regardless of position, now they need to make sure, though, that he stays healthy for the games that matter the most. So you're going to use him a lot next year. You should still be a run-first offense, but you can't have him take on the historic usage rate that he had in 2024. He cannot have that many carries, that many touches in 2025 as well. And this is a physical cyborg. Like, Saquon Barkley, you build this kind of guy in a lab when it comes to his health, his athleticism, the way he takes care of his body. The usage, the punishment that he was able to take last year is unbelievable. I can't believe he made it through the entire season. But at the same time, he's an aging running back that does have an injury history. You need him for the most important moments of the season, late in December, January, potentially in February, in playoff games, the biggest games of the year. I do want them to get back to a more balanced approach in 2025. Not saying it has to be 50-50 in favor of, not saying it's got to be 70-30 in favor of the pass, but I do think it has to be more balanced than last year where the Eagles threw the football fewer than any team in the NFL. So I think that's the main thing that I think has to happen in 2025. Be more balanced. But I think Saquon Barkley was worth it. And it's crazy to say this about a running back getting paid historic money, considering what we know about roster building in the NFL. But again, Saquon Barkley is not just any running back. This is a generational player that carried you to a championship, and I think he can do it again. He was worth every penny of this contract. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. The Eagles released Darius Slay yesterday, James Bradberry today. It's a new era at the cornerback position. What is the idea for replacing Darius Slay specifically next year? I'm going to tell you why I don't think it should involve Cooper DeJean. That's coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. This episode of Locked On Eagles is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature. It keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether you're backing your team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, you never feel like you're missing your chance. Plus, the app is super easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, so Howie Roseman is busy at work. He released Darius Slay yesterday, released James Bradberry today, signed Saquon Barkley to the most money in NFL history at the running back position. But let's go back to the cornerback position, which was dominating the headlines the last 2 days with Slay and Bradberry gone. What is the plan moving forward in 2025? Of course, we know Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, they're going to be 2/3 of that equation. Quinyon Mitchell is going to be one of your boundary corners next season. But what is the move next year to replace Darius Slay? I'm here to tell you, I do not think, as good as Cooper DeJean was in 2025 as a Rookie of the Year finalist, PFF's #1 graded corner overall last year, I do not think the Eagles should move Cooper DeJean from the slot to the outside and make him the replacement to Darius Slay. I don't think that is the right move. And I will say, if they went that route, could Cooper DeJean do it? Could he replace Darius Slay next year? Yeah, of course he could. He primarily was a boundary corner at Iowa. But, and again, like he can be a good outside cornerback, but he can be a great slot cornerback. He already is a great and elite slot cornerback. That is where I truly think his ceiling is. It's in the slot. It's being an elite slot that's not a mismatch for any type of wide receiver. You know, smaller slot corners, naturally that's who plays the position. But the problem is in the NFL now, all kinds of receivers are going into the slot. Like stars are playing inside a lot that are, you know, bigger bodies like an A.J. Brown, elite route runners like Devontae Smith or a C.D. Lamb. And then, yeah, you do have the undersized speed players that are also going into the slot. But you have technicians, you have big players going in there at wide receiver. You've got everybody. So to have a matchup-proof player at slot corner in Cooper DeJean that can take on any type of receiver that we know can be a plus in the run game, one of your best tacklers. We saw him body slam Derrick Henry last year, the biggest running back that I've ever seen in my entire life, with his just two arms, pile drived him into the ground like he was a WWE wrestler. The fact that he can do all of that, he can cover tight ends and running backs, he has the athleticism to return punts. Like having that kind of elite player in the slot in the modern day NFL, again, considering the types of weapons on the other side that are playing inside at tight end, at receiver, at running back as well. You look at like the Eagles sometimes motioning Saquon Barkley into the slot or a Christian McCaffrey. Having this kind of player is so crucial. So again, you could understand why the Eagles would say, hey, we have this elite cornerback. Let's put Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell on the outside, call it a day. We'll find a replacement in the slot like we've done in the past with a Patrick Robinson, a Crayvon LeBlanc, an Avonte Maddox. Like that could be an idea, but I don't think that's fully reaching the ceiling of your defense. Cooper DeJean can be a really good outside corner, but he can be the best slot cornerback in the game. And I think they know that's where his career should be taking place mostly. I think they drafted him in the second round to be their version of Brian Branch, their Swiss Army knife on defense that can do it all, to be their, a Kyle Hamilton for Baltimore, just the Malcolm Jenkins that you used to have. I don't think when they drafted Cooper DeJean in the second round, they were saying, hey, it's going to be Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean on the outside. Again, can you do that? Sure. He can be a good player there, but he's a great player where he is now. I just think the combination of Quinyon Mitchell, another young corner on the outside, and Cooper DeJean in the slot is a better trio than Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean on the outside and another young player or veteran you bring in the slot. I don't think that's the better route to go. I think Cooper DeJean should stay in the slot in 2025. So if Cooper is not the guy to replace Slay, then who is? Darius Slay could still be back on a lower number, but I do think he'll get more money. He'll have to take a really cheap deal to come back to Philly. I think he'll get more money on a good team like a Detroit Lions or, the Baltimore Ravens, maybe the Buffalo Bills. There's other teams out there that I think that are good that'll also be paying him more than Philadelphia will be willing to. So I think the most likely scenario is, and I do think the Eagles are leaning this way more than putting Cooper DeJean on the outside. I think the more likely scenario is Isaiah Rodgers is re-signed. Like, he's one of your top players you prioritize bringing back in free agency next week. And I think you let him battle it out with a 22-year-old that's turning 23 soon in Kelee Ringo that has all the physical traits, that showed flashes in 2023, that was one of your best special teams players in 2024, that you traded up a future third-round pick to go get in 2023. I think it's time to give Kelee Ringo a real chance. I know Vic Fangio doesn't love him as much as he does Isaiah Rodgers, but I think the Eagles, the front office, needs to be like, hey, Vic, you need to give Ringo a real chance to win this job because his ceiling is extremely high. So I think that's the likely scenario. It's Ringo versus Rodgers in camp for this job. But even if it's not Ringo and it's Rodgers, like I've said on the show before, I like Isaiah Rodgers. He has elite speed. He's 27 years old. He's in his prime. He's not going to cost a whole lot to bring back. I thought he played extremely well in, reserve in certain spots when he had to come in for Darius Slay. I think that's a good plan, is Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, 2/3 of your cornerback room. It's solidified. Coop in the slot, Quinyon on the outside. Let Ringo and Rodgers battle it out. May the best man win. Let's hope it's Ringo. But if it's Rodgers, hey, we're good to go. I think that's the best plan. I think the front office likes Kelee Ringo a little bit more. I would say Vic Fangio likes Isaiah Rodgers a little bit more. But I think both guys can, for a lot cheaper of a price, come in and I would say, I don't want to say replicate what Darius Slay did in 2024 because he was unbelievable. Darius Slay, maybe that's an aggressive word, unbelievable, but Darius Slay was a really good player in 24. He was one of the most underrated parts of the defense. I thought he had an incredible run in the playoffs too. The only problem was he just kept coming on and off the field with injuries, but he was a really good player last year. I think Ringo and Rodgers, they're not going to replicate that, but they can match that production by 70, 75% at half the price. Like, it's not going to cost you. I mean, Ringo's on a day 3 rookie contract, and I can't imagine Rodgers' extension is going to really cost you all that much. It's certainly going to be cheaper than what Darius Slay had on the books over a double-digit cap hit in 2025. So I think that's the best course of action. In base packages, it's DeJean and Quinyon. And then when you Ringo or Rodgers, I think that's the best plan for next year, even over bringing Darius Slay back. I just don't think that's going to happen. If the Eagles do want to take another route at corner that doesn't have to do with Darius Slay, Kelee Ringo, or Isaiah Rodgers, there are some names out there that I really like, and we'll get into that coming up next as we wrap up this Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles. All right, so I think the plan at corner for 2025 should be Quinyon Mitchell on the outside, Cooper DeJean in the slot. I think you re-sign Isaiah Rodgers, let him and Kelee Ringo battle it out this summer, hoping Ringo wins that job. Again, he's younger than Quinyon Mitchell. He has so much upside, so much potential. He has flashed on the field in 2023 at the end of the year. I thought he put on some really good tape. This year he showed that his tackling woes might be behind him. I really like Kelee Ringo. I'm bullish on him. I think he can be the guy moving forward next year. Whether it's him or Rodgers, though, that's a good, cost-effective plan B now that Darius Slay is gone. But if they do want to go for a younger, more long-term option that isn't Ringo or Rodgers, but it's not Darius Slay either, there are two players that you guys know are two of my favorite players in the league that I think the Eagles should reconsider. Reconsider, considering they had an opportunity to keep one of these guys long-term, and they had an opportunity to draft one of these players back in 2021. So for two offseason options at cornerback next week in free agency, how about a guy I would not have shut up about for years on this podcast when he was in Midnight Green? It's Rasul Douglas. How about the return of the Zool Hive to the Locked On Eagles podcast? Yes, Rasul Douglas, he is not 23 years old like Kelee Ringo. He's not even 27 like Isaiah Rodgers. He is 30 at this point, but he's 4 years younger than Darius Slay. He is a playmaker. 3 years in a row before 2024, he had at least 4 interceptions and at least double-digit pass deflections. He was top 10 in pass deflections for years. Like, he is one of the best playmakers the NFL has seen at cornerback over the last 5 years when he was in Green Bay, when he was in Buffalo. I'm not surprised at all that Zool has had this career trajectory. I said in Philly all along that Jim Schwartz was not giving this guy a fair chance. I think he showed this kind of potential during the playoff run of 2018. I think he showed flashes in 2019 as well, but he was just never Jim Schwartz's guy. I don't think he fit that scheme at all. I think Douglas fits Vic Fangio's scheme with a too-high safety shell. Rasul Douglas can be more of a risk taker. He can make plays on the ball. He's a good tackler. He's a lengthy, physical corner that is still in his prime. He's 30 years old. His market might be too competitive for the Eagles. Like, the money might be too rich for Howie's blood. But I do think Howie loves a good reunion. And this one makes a lot more sense than bringing back like a Javon Hargrave or a Kazir White or maybe even Hassan Reddick. Rasul Douglas is somebody that Howie Roseman, I believe, was always in on and drafted him in the 3rd round for a reason. He even mentioned last year when he was talking about, changing his ways and maybe drafting a corner, he, without saying his name, mentioned Rasul Douglas as a guy that he said, we've also missed on some of the players that we did have in here that had success elsewhere. I think he was talking directly about Rasul Douglas. So Howie's always tried to right his wrongs of the past, and I think Zool would make some sense next to Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. And my guy John Barchard of the Bell and the Birdman said it great on X yesterday. What an incredible trash-talking secondary that would be to have Zool, Quinyon, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I mean, my gosh, talk about an all-time troll team. If the money was right, I kind of like the idea of bringing in Rasul Douglas for a short-term contract. Maybe he bets on himself, and he didn't have a great 2024. I think his market will still be good. I mean, maybe he comes in on a 1-2 year deal and tries to cash back in next offseason, takes advantage, tries to win another ring in Philly. You guys know I would love that idea. And then there's another player that they could consider as well that I also loved in the 2021 NFL Draft. You drafted Jeremiah Trotter Jr. last year. How about bringing in Asante Samuel Jr. this year? He is an unrestricted free agent for the first time, potentially leaving LA, dealt with some injuries last year, but I love his speed. I love his playmaking ability. I don't know if Vic Fangio would like him, considering the tackling issues. Missed 22% of his tackles last year before he was injured. I think he struggled in that scheme with Jim Harbaugh for the first year. But I think overall, Asante is still young. He still has that speed, that long-range speed I really like. And how cool of a story would it be? You have Jeremiah Trotter Jr. potentially starting next year in place of Nakobe Dean, and you have Asante Samuel Jr. on the outside. Two legendary Eagles, their sons, are now playing on the Eagles defense and maybe wearing their dad's jerseys. Jeremiah Trotter Jr., number 54, and then you have Asante wearing number 22. I mean, that would be a really cool story. And again, the tackling's a problem, but he is a really good coverage corner. Normally, somebody that's up there in overall coverage grade. Had a down year last year in a new system before an injury. But I think Asante is an interesting player. Again, these guys, it depends on how their market unfolds. But Rasul Douglas and Asante Samuel Jr., they're two of my favorite players. And I think it would make some sense if you feel like Ringo and Rodgers just aren't good enough, they don't move the needle for you, but you don't want to go with the 1-year farewell tour of Darius Slay and want to go a little bit younger. I think Zool or Asante make a lot of sense. Let's say they do put Cooper DeJean on the outside. Again, I don't think they should, but let's say they do. There's another Lou DiBiase, my guy, from 2020 that I think would make some sense, and it's a fellow Los Angeles Charger, Christian Fulton, a former second-round pick out of LSU, one of my favorite players from that draft. Did not have a great career in Tennessee, but came over to LA this past year, played in the slot where I think he fits better, and he had a really good year. Christian Fulton is a player, I think, again, I don't want him as a option for the boundary, but if you move Cooper DeJean on the outside, again, something I wouldn't do, but let's say they do take that approach. Christian Fulton in the slot, I think would be the best case scenario for this offseason. So those are three guys that, again, I don't think Howie Roseman's going to target, but if he does want to be somewhat aggressive and continue to invest in this secondary, and he wants to go younger, but he doesn't believe in Ringo and Rodgers as the long-term answers, Rasul Douglas, Asante Samuel Jr., maybe Christian Fulton, depending on what your plan is with Cooper DeJean. Those are some options, at least for me. I'm sure none of those suggestions surprise you in the slightest if you've been listening to the show for the last 8 years. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On NFL Draft podcast with my guys Damian Parsons and Keith Sanchez, getting you ready for the 2025 NFL Draft each and every day. As always, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.